Alright, here's an interesting one. Basically, I got this mower because the person who owns it said that when they were cutting uphill, it was under load and it sounded like it had a rod knock. So I assumed that it wasn't a rod knock, that it was just something simple, like maybe the motor mount bolts shook loose or something and it was shaking back and forth. So I did a compression test when I first got it, and it read like below 90 psi, which is kind of weird. So I went ahead and readjusted the valves, tightened them back down. Not that that would really improve the compression that much, probably make it worse. But basically I was trying to crank it over after I did adjust the valves, and I noticed that there was the crank case was actually moving separately from this plate right here. And I did notice when I was first starting to work on it, I found this dowel just sitting in between the fins right there. And apparently that dowel is supposed to go right here. Just right here in that hole. But it's not in there, so it shook out. And then I also noticed that these bolts are not even tightened down at all. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this flywheel and see what's going on in there. It seems to be pretty bad. So I got the flywheel off. Now I just got to get the stator off, or rotor, whatever you want to call it, and this plate. I'm going to take the valve cover back off again and then turn the motor over to make sure that the push rods or the cam isn't on the lifters, so that way it's idle, so that way the cam isn't going to make it hard to take that top cover off. Now that there's no load on either of the springs and cams, I'm going to go ahead and get the starter off and get this out of the way, and then it'll be easier to pull this plate off so I can set it to the side. Apparently there's no easy way to get this off because of the way that this wire is run, so I don't want to have to take the little connectors out of this plastic piece. That might break, so I'm just gonna use whatever length is on this wire to set it off to the side with. So I got all these bolts off, and I almost forgot to drain the oil, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that and take the oil filter off so it doesn't make a huge mess, and then I'll show the plate coming off. I don't know if you can see it, but there is quite a bit of shavings in the oil. I don't know why, but these twin cam engines always have that problem, so it may be bad or worse than the last one that I dealt with, but who knows. I don't think this is going to pull anything out with it, but it might. Wow. Those are extremely large cam gears. Quite a bit of metal at the bottom. It's kind of hard to see on camera. Everything's pressurized oil, even the upper bearing, crankshaft bearing. Oh, and there seems to be some slack because the connecting rod is not moving when I do that. So I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way. I went ahead and made some little scratches on the cam gear and the pinion gear, so that way I know where to put them back whenever I reassemble it. And you can also see how loose these cams are, since I made sure it's on the compression stroke, so that way there's no load on them. Something kind of cool with some of these motors, the oil pump is driven by one of the cam gear shafts, and basically they're hollow, and when they get spun, the oil comes up through the middle of the shaft past the cam and then oils everything up here and all that. Pretty neat. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and take this head off. So far I am very impressed with the condition of this machine. I am going to be able to reuse all the gaskets. This one kind of did split a little bit, but it's a very thin amount, and the way it's split, it's going to be able to go back together just fine, especially knowing that the cover is on the top instead of on the bottom like on most of the machines. And also the head gasket appears to be in good shape, and the cross honing is even still in the cylinders, so I'm not sure that there's anything super badly wrong with it. I do feel like there might be something going wrong with this counterweight system over here, but I'm not sure yet. It's kind of hard to tell. Alright, so I got the head off in the pulley, and the bolt here, which holds the counterweights together, appears to be on a nut in the back, so I'm basically just going to go ahead and unbolt the connecting rod and push the piston back and take it out, and then I'll just slide the whole crank assembly out. Okay, so nothing appears to be wrong with the rotating parts of this engine. So basically what I'm going to do is clean everything up, especially all the carbon off this piston, because it's pretty bad. Get all the rings back in there right carefully, and then I'm going to go ahead and probably take the valves apart, because I think that might be the issue with the compression, because there's a lot of carbon in there. So I'm just going to clean everything up and then do the valves and then put it back together and hope it works. Alright, so I got everything cleaned up nicely. I'm going to go ahead and start putting it back together, so I'll do a time lapse. Alright, so I got it back together most of the way now, and just wanted to show what I meant by adjusting the valves on this. Basically, this has a rocker stud instead of a bolt, and there's basically this very long nut that the rocker actually pivots on, and there's a set screw down in there. I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's got a star bit. I believe it's a T10 or like a T15, and you basically loosen that up, and then it relieves the pressure off the stud, so that way this can just spin freely, and then you just adjust the rocker as necessary. Right now I have it pretty loose to increase the compression, because there's actually an extra bump or lobe on this cam. So you can see the intake valve going down, and then you'll basically see it move a little bit, the exhaust valve. I don't know if you can see that, but it is moving. There's a small extra lobe, and then it goes through the compression stroke and then down, fires, and then it opens normally. But there is an extra lobe there, so you can adjust this for more looseness, and you get more compression, and then basically the tighter you have it, the less compression you have. It's supposed to have a little weight in there that once the motor starts, that goes away, but sometimes it doesn't work, so you just have to use it with the low compression. Alrighty, everything's together, tires are all aired up, pulley's back on, so I'm just going to see if it's going to do a first start. Maybe it doesn't want the choke.